whole. My aspirations are probably no different from yours. I hope Taiwan will find a more just solution to its predicament because it has been de facto independent. But many of the obstacles reside in the arbitrary nature of certain definitions of nation state. I will continue to advocate democratization in Hong Kong, but I also see few practical solutions for overcoming many of its immense political obstacles. Moreover, dreams don't count. I don't mind expressing my own radical opinions, outrageous as they may be, because that is in the end our wish to be judged. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Helen. Let's take that off. We now have opportunity for questions and comments, both from the floor and from the gathered multitudes online. Just getting my specs so that I can see. That's fine. You can sit wherever you like. I do have something in the chat. Let me just see what that is initially. That's fine. That's just telling us that we can be heard. So people online, as I said before, if you wish to ask a question, please put it in the chat. Here, we'll do it in an orthodox manner. But while you're thinking, I would like to address one or two things that Alan has said in his very stimulating, complex, and to some extent, as I thought, provocative talk. And this has to do with the way that, in my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there was a way that you were understanding the concept of ethnicity as linked with nationalism or nationhood. And it seems to me that the situation in 1991 and the situation in 2022 are radically different. And that while I would go along with you quite happily to say that by 1991, up to 1991 certainly, the political sides in Taiwan were defined ethnically, and that's a commonplace. It seems to me, in my more recent engagement with the place, by which I mean probably over the last 10 years, and with particularly younger people, students, and so forth, ethnicity, the whole idea of ethnicity in Taiwan is actually very different from what it was. That in the standard model, you know, the mainlanders equal the KMT, equal the north of Taiwan, equal speaking Mandarin, and, you know, vice versa. And that the democracy movement was partly an ethnic uprising against quasi or completely colonial force in the form of the mainlanders. And by 1991, I mean, I'm not at all surprised that you see hangovers from the martial law era. Still, not much has changed. Schools being inherently very conservative places. But demographically, it seems to me now when you talk to Taiwanese people, I don't know how many in this room are Taiwanese, but I can see that you're much younger than I am. But talking to those people who are younger and that I know who are Taiwanese, questions of mainlander or non-mainlander are largely irrelevant. That they grow up, you, I'm not sure, excuse my pronouns, but young Taiwanese now grow up with much less awareness of the ethnic division that used to be apparent, and that they have friends who, you know, come from the other side or whose parents came from opposite sides. The languages they speak are often not much of an issue anymore because so many people who were native Taiwanese speakers were taught to speak Mandarin and so on and so forth. And there are a good deal of people who come from the other side who either regret not having learned Taiwanese or are trying to learn Taiwanese because it's the language of their place, as it were. So I'm wondering to what extent the linkage between ethnicity and nationalism or a national identity of Taiwan still holds. Or are you saying that there is a new constructed Taiwanese ethnicity along the lines perhaps of Li Binghui's quote unquote new Taiwanese, which has taken the place of the old ethnic division?
Well, you're dealing with a very a long historical time period and
well, you
many
did too.
complex things.
Yeah.
Of course, at any one point, there are different interpretations of this. I mean, cynicization, even if you take it in the typical Chiang Kai-shek terms, was not just about mainlander versus Taiwanese. It was about recovering China from a colonial Japanese past as well. Okay, so it was a very hard line language and culture policy, which defended, yes, traditional China, but also against the backdrop of the fact that Taiwan was coming out of a colonial era. So there are many sides to this, and of course, we also know that part of this was also repression of local Taiwanese. So, I mean, it's clear that whatever ethnicity was a very hard and fast definition that was related to the kind of cultural nationalist regime that the KMT was trying to impose. Okay, but that over time changed. I mean, even if you look at, say, Jiang Jingguo. Jiang Jingguo actually was a radical. He during his heyday, he said in Zhejiang accent, "I'm Taiwanese." What does that mean? Okay, things had also changed by that time. Taiwan was losing, ROC was losing its global influence, and certainly I think it got kicked out during Jiang Jingguo's regime. So part of that shift was also a kind of shift away from the hard line that Chiang Kai-shek represented into a kind of indigenizing kind of mode. So actually indigenization started with Jiang Jingguo, not the DPP. I mean, we had the DPP which was a repressed, represented Taiwan ethnic roots, so on and so forth. Yeah, but the KMT was also evolving. People tend to forget that not all Taiwanese were pro-DPP. Taiwan is 75% Taiwanese. Now, why is it that during the first three elections, after criticizing the DPP as being mainlanders, so on and so forth, they still voted for the KMT?
Yeah.
Okay. At that time,
well, one reason was that the presidential candidate, the KMT in that election, was aggressively Taiwanese. Yeah.
Well, I also said at that time that the people tend to forget that there was the greatest threat to the DPP wasn't the conservative KMT, but the Taiwanese faction.
Of course.
That's the faction represented by Li Binghui and these people. And who are they? Well, I mean, you can go into games as to what they really represented. As we found out later on, well, in the beginning, Li Binghui was very pro-KMT, but afterwards he became pro-DPP, so on and so forth, and got kicked out of KMT. Well, okay, whatever. I mean, these are political mind games that we can, continue to play. And of course, yes, I agree. Okay, how important are mainlander identity versus Taiwanese identity, so on and so forth. These were also changing over time as well. But what I was criticizing is not so much that people have ethnic identity, but they think that ethnic identity is real. In other words, Taiwanization is really a return to real roots, recognition of real roots. Okay, I'm saying any ethnicity is fictive. It's a construction. I keep saying to my sociological colleagues, by the way, so in Taiwan, if you notice how sociologists talk about Taiwanese ethnic relationships, it's Western versus Western, mainlander versus Taiwanese. if these are ethnic groups, why is it that these ethnic groups only exist in Taiwan? And by the way, what is Waisan? What is Waisan culture? It's just Chinese culture, right? So if that's not a construction, if that's not a fiction, I don't know what is.
Of course, but I mean, in the same way that Taiwanese people will still talk about Taiwanese Aboriginal people as if they're a unity.
Yeah, but I think
all of these are fictive.
I think what you see now is a general sort of trend towards indigenization, meaning Taiwan first.
Yeah.
Okay. Taiwan first. What multiculturalism means is not the same thing as multiculturalism in Australia. Because multiculturalism only applies to Taiwanese. In other words, multiculturalism means Taiwan consists of Taiwanese and Aboriginals and Hakka, vis-a-vis other Chinese. It actually doesn't include foreigners. When you think about it. So
is that I would have agreed with you a number of years ago, but is that still the case with the link to Vietnam and Filipino people and so on?
Yeah, well, I mean, you'd be surprised how conservative Taiwan is. I mean, it's not unlike Japan. I mean, Japan is a very international, multicultural society, but you know, they've never really embraced naturalization of non-ethnic Japanese. And that's another side of it. You say, well, why is that the case? So it's another way of saying multiculturalism in Taiwan, whatever that means. It's really anti-cynicization, and that's it. It's not multiculturalism in the sense that in the general
Australia or other versions.
Yeah,
indeed. All right, so we blathered here a bit. I'm not getting anything online. Is there any comment or question from the floor? Yes, Matt.
Well, thank you, Professor Chun, and thank you, Ben. I actually had some of that in my question because I'm very interested in of course, your previous work on kind of tracking the shift in the academy of cynicization to indigenization. So my question is just, in recent times, so broadly speaking, since the end of martial law, have you noticed the shift from cynicization to indigenization, not just in the academy, but also play out in the academic or the education system? Is it something that?
Well, I think academia is much more influenced by the politics than anything else. I mean, this is why I say, well, you know, all these multiculturalist institutes, it's about political correctness. It has nothing to do with academia. I remember the first time they created these institutes of multiculturalism, which is basically a brand for Austronesian culture. Many of my students and colleagues were hired in these places. And I said, well, what's multiculturalism? How do you teach that? And they said, I don't know. It's just a job. I mean, you know, the fact is it's there and you have to teach it however way. I mean, we're sociologists, anthropologists, so on and so forth. They don't know what multiculturalism is. And the same seems to apply for, I mean, in the early 2000s, I mean, there's a whole rash of these institutes of Taiwanese culture and so Hakka culture. By the way, Hakka institutes are faculties. They're not just departments. In other words, in that faculty of Hakka study, you have a Department of Liberal Arts, Department of Communication, which makes it even bigger than, you know, well, why do you need ethnic studies of that kind of stature? I don't even know. I really doubt if we even have 20 departments of Australian studies in Australia. Why do you need so many departments of Taiwanese studies in Taiwan? I took a look at the website of our Hakka faculty in Chiao Tung University. I can ask the same question because I know how these people teach there. And what do you think is the percentage of the faculty who actually does Hakka studies in this faculty of Hakka studies? Do you remember?
10%?
Okay, well, okay, it's about 20%. Okay, but it's kind of strange. Then you say, well, what are they actually teaching in the faculty of Hakka studies? If its primary objective is to teach Hakka studies, and only 20% of the faculty and even students, you know, they also attract you know, international students from India, Nigeria, so on and so forth. I can't possibly imagine that they attract these students to study Hakka. They could be studying anything. They
So
could
what,
do-
if only 20% of these people do Hakka studies in a Hakka studies faculty, what do the other 80% teach?
That's a good question. They teach-
Well, I mean,
they
you know
just-
them, I don't know them.
They just teach the regular anthropology, ethnic studies, things pertaining what one might imagine would pertain to Hakka studies. Ethnicity, probably, the big thing. I mean, you could ask the same question in the context of Simon Tui Tree Principles. And I can tell you, I've looked through these catalogs and said, wow, they're teaching the same thing that any other education faculty is teaching. I mean, if only 20% of these courses have anything to do with Tree Principles, what are they actually teaching? They're just teaching regular social science. And what about these students? I also asked this of students. I said, why would a student want to apply to this kind of institute, especially knowing that that's not its primary interest? Well, I assume that, if you're a good student in history and sociology, you would apply to a graduate faculty student. I mean, if you don't get into them, then there's always three principles institute, you see. I would say the same thing about these Hakka faculties as well. Even though they have departments of anthropology, I assume that the top students would probably apply to regular departments of anthropology. And the rest, apply elsewhere. Why not?
Well, I think one difference might be that Hakka studies is about Hakka people and Hakka culture, and such things exist. There are Hakka people, there is their culture. Sanminjui is nothing. Sanminjui is a hollow shell, which is pointless to study. It's like Marxism Leninism in the mainland, there's whole departments of Marxism Leninism study.
Of course.
And I mentioned less than 10% of those people actually teach anything about Marx or Lenin. I know that.
A little more than that.
I know that members of the Chinese
There's a
Communist
different
Party.
dynamic going on across that street.
Well, the members of the Chinese Communist Party who go to Communist Party meetings that I have spoken to about this have never once in their life in a meeting read any Marx, Lenin, Stalin, or Mao. They only read Xi Jinping.
Right.
There's no Marxism, Leninism.
Or at
There's
least
no.
that's what they'll tell you.
Well, no, this was just straight on. So that's what they study. They never do Marx, Last time they read Marx was in high school. Anyway, be that my.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Well, there we are. There is a question here from a person, I believe, at University of Sydney. Indeed, at the University of Sydney. Hercules Chu or Chu. And he says, Professor Chun, thank you very much for the talk. My questions are, I'll take this off so you can hear me properly. Will media affect the education of Taiwan to a greater extent than it affected education in Taiwan during the 80s? And secondly, what institutional changes, if any, have you found since your fieldwork in 1990? What institutional changes in the education system have you seen that might contribute to something called Taiwanese identity development?
Okay, two questions. The media has always been influential in general academia. I mean, academics appear all the time on television, so not me, of course. Many of them are very media friendly. And it's not surprising to discover that there is a kind of symbiosis between these two things, which is what keeps the mindset ongoing. But I'm not a specialist in media studies per se, so I think maybe others may have a more sophisticated understanding of it. And second question, well, has the school changed? Of course. I recently emailed my assistant who did the original research and who is teaching in the schools, and I said, could we just chat about updates? He said, oh, it has changed so much. I can't imagine how much has changed. At least on the surface, I would agree to. But I think the point of my study was not to sort of follow these changes on the surface to the present, but rather to show that I use the school to say that it's actually the backdrop for something else. And that something else is really ongoing. I agree totally. I wouldn't even, I'm quite sure all these activities, the whole face of the school has changed dramatically. I don't doubt that. But that's not really what I'm sort of addressing.
But do those changes not mean that the backdrop for future social change is a different backdrop?
Well, I don't disagree that it's being influenced by the same politicizing influences that we're talking about. You know, not just the indigenization, but Taiwan in the world. There are many other sort of themes here that have been influencing the general political discourse. I'm quite sure the school is very much part of this. But I think what I wanted to present was that, underlying all of this is still a very hardcore nationalist mindset. That's what I'm saying. I mean, why do we need national identity to begin with? I look at Taiwan and I say, well, why do we need identity to begin with? That's a modern construction. Why can't I say I'm just a citizen of the world? See?
Well, I mean, this country we had.
Yeah,
I grew up in a time when people were going, what does it mean to be Australian? What's the Australian identity? And people getting worried about it. People don't seem worried about it anymore.
Yeah, but these are just constructions, and all we can say is different places have different ways of constructing these. I'm saying that in Taiwan, however national identity is defined, it's very much defined by ethnicity, which is in itself a very arbitrary definition. And they can't seem to get away from it.
Okay. More questions? Are you taking off your mask?
I might sit on this one. It's a big one.
Sure.
I'm not sure, Professor Chun, if you read Rogers Brewbaker's stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Groups.
Of course.
So I've been racking my brains with this, and I've even decided to my students to try and come to a possibility of trying to get with what he's getting at and how it might apply to an Asian context. So do you think that that's a fit, or do you think that's fitting something to conveniently to the Procrastinating Taiwan situation?
So could you just tell us again the author and
Rogers Brewbaker and
Ethnicity Without Groups.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send you a paper in which I criticize him. Okay, I mean, I know exactly how he's thinking. He's thinking as a typical sociologist. Okay, that's my sort of critique of it. Well, what does that mean, typical sociologist? Well, you notice that he doesn't talk about discourse, right? He talks about sociological categories, and he talks about practical categories in Bourdieu's terms. But it's not an attempt. This is just sociology. In other words, these are sociological abstractions. From the very beginning, I said, why can't we take into account what people are saying about their identities? That counts for something. That's what a discourse is. People talk about it. They may be irrational. I mean, Australians might have a very irrational notion of identity, but it's you have to explain why they're even thinking in these terms, right? It may be on the surface irrational, imaginary, but there is a rational basis for talking about them. And it's not necessarily in the content, it's in their form, the way they relate to certain aspects of social practice and daily life, so on and so forth. And that's what it's about. So,
would you like to ask a question? No, just I saw your hand do this. Maybe the last question now is coming online from Vicky Gao, who asks you, she'd like to hear your comments on the phenomena in recent years that many Taiwanese celebrities have made their way in the mainland Chinese market by supporting the One China policy. Do you have views on Taiwanese celebrity culture and the One China policy?
Didn't I give you a copy of my book on Chineseness? On the cover of it was a cartoon. I don't know if people have noticed that, but the cartoon was about this Taiwanese K-pop singer who in 2017, I think, actually I came across this cartoon with proofreading it, so I didn't, that's not my cartoon. What is her name? Joey? Okay. I forget what her name is. She was a 15-year-old Taiwanese K-pop performer. And she went on social media to during Double 10 to say, I'm proud to be Taiwanese. And the Chinese sponsor, the PRC sponsor of that K-pop group, threatened to cancel all their engagements, future engagements, if she did not apologize. So she eventually went on to social media to apologize by saying, I'm proud to be Chinese. That's political correctness, right? You know, that's standard knowledge for entertainers, Taiwanese entertainers in Taiwan. You're free to make money as long as you don't preach Taiwan independence. The same for Hong Kong people. That's the condition of political correctness. That's how the system is being run. Yes, of course, I know that, but the question really is, what are we going to do about it? Or what can you do about it? I think people want to make money, just shut up and say, of course, I'll do anything you want to, right? This includes a lot of Taiwanese performers as well. But this is exactly what the new rise of China is about. It's not about capitalism, it's about political correctness. That's using capitalism as a kind of leverage to maintain a certain cultural homogeneity, so to speak.
On that depressing note, perhaps it's time that we wound up. So
well, you're immune, so you don't have to worry about it.
Thank you very much, Alan, for that discussion and that very stimulating and interesting talk. When does the book come out?
Well, I don't know yet. I'm still fishing around for a publisher.
Oh, okay, right. So
that's
another story.
Maybe I'll follow Matthew and try to go now.
You could try ANU Press. ANU Press is very good. Anyway, that's just another story. So we look forward to a publisher accepting your book, and so that we can have a look at the book itself. And thank you very much, everybody here, and thank you very much, everybody who's online. And we will welcome you back to ANU the next time you're passing through Canberra. So thank you once again.
Nice to be here again.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be able to be back in our home. So I think within the ANU China seminar series, we have a seminar next week, don't we?
Yes, we do. We have Emily Williams who will be joining us and presenting on her new book, which is really exciting, on kind of British-Chinese interactions. We've also done a lot of really exciting stuff on nostalgia and collecting from the Cultural Revolution era. So a lot of material history, and she'll be joining us from Xi'an Jiaotong University, Liverpool University in Suzhou. So
if all of that comes together, but because she's in Suzhou, it will be an entirely online presentation. So if you wish to take part in that, there'll be publicity going around very soon, I hope. And it'll be a matter of registering on our Zoom thing, and then you'll get all the connections. So thank you once again for coming. Thanks. Someone called Philip O'Reilly. Thanks you very much. I don't know. I'm just asking whether I'm telling you her name because I thought the way that she might know you.